Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks, where I discuss everything books in the hopes of inspiring others to love reading as much as I do. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with middle grade author and editor Jonathan Rosen. Jonathan is the administrator of FromTheMixedUpFiles.com, a site devoted to middle grade books, and he's a founding member of SpookyMG.com, a website devoted to everything spooky and middle grade books. Today, I'm happy to be talking to Jonathan about his newest novel, Coming of Age, 13 Minute Mitzvah Stories, a Jewish anthology he co-authored and edited. We'll also be chatting about his coming-of-age short story, Pocket Watch. I'm excited to learn about Jonathan's writing journey, as well as what led him to help create this entertaining and meaningful anthology of Jewish B'nai Mitzvah stories. But before we get into our book chat, I'm going to share a few things I learned about Jonathan while doing some online research. I know that there are 3 things that Jonathan and I have in common. 1, we're both Jewish. 2, we are both fans of Phineas and Ferb. And 3, we both think Spider-Man is hands down the greatest superhero that ever lived.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So even if you haven't read and loved the Coming of Age anthology, you are going to be a big fan, but from listening to our interview. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so grateful that you came here today because my goal of the Coming of Age author panel is to combat anti-Semitism, and your Coming of Age anthology, that's its main goal, to combat anti-Semitism, because unfortunately, us Jews, we're facing a lot of hate lately. There's more anti-Semitism now. It hasn't been as bad as this since the 1970s, and it's just horrible to think about. So Coming of Age was such a fun and meaningful read, filled with 13 unique and entertaining stories about 13 different kids experiencing one thing in common, their Jewish bar or bat mitzvah. As someone that will be going through my own bar mitzvah, I really appreciated reading about the experiences of all the 13 protagonists and just learning about what a bar or bat mitzvah is. And it wouldn't be a Jewish ceremony if there wasn't some drama involved. And I know that all middle graders, whether they're Jewish or they're not, they can really relate to what each of the main characters go through. That's one of the reasons that I really love the Coming of Age 13 Minute Mitzvah Stories anthology. So I mentioned that you're one of the creators of the idea of the Coming of Age anthology. So will you share a bit about Coming of Age 13 Minute Mitzvah Stories and how the project came to be?
It really was a desire to see more Jewish stories out there. It's something that, I've always been told through the years, myself and other authors, that make something less Jewish or so, to books. So I wanted to see more Jewish stories out there. And I approached, my co-editor, Henry, and let's, do this. We got some people together and, everyone pretty much jumped right in. All the authors that we asked readily agreed right off the bat. So there was no convincing. So that was great. And, we wanted to do it, one, just bring Jewish stories to there. And you mentioned, I don't know if the main purpose was to fight anti-Semitism. That was just a side benefit. The main purpose was really just to entertain, just get Jewish representation. But the, bringing light to anti-Semitism was definitely one of the side benefits of it.
Yeah. So, from what I've heard, the Coming of Age story, it's there's a lot of work involved. How do you it's so interesting. I've never really read an anthology before. So I just find it so impressive that you managed to get 13 authors on board, and they're all just entertaining the readers. And the stories are about bar mitzvahs and b'nai mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, but they're also just really relatable to both middle grade readers who are Jewish and aren't. And I think that's what's really great about the Coming of Age anthology, because it can really just entertain all readers, and it sheds a light on the Jewish story. And it can also, for others who don't really understand a b'nai mitzvah, but it can also make Jewish readers kind of feel seen, and they know that somebody is going through the same experiences as them, whether they're fictional or real.
That was definitely one of the main points that we wanted to do. And I know certainly what I wanted to do is have Jewish kids see themselves in the stories and being able to relate. I'm going through this problem. You yourself were talking about, you're going to have a bar mitzvah, so that they can relate to the Jewish protagonist going through the same thing. And like you just said, we want other kids non-Jews to be able to relate to the stories as well. Hey, we might not be going through a bar mitzvah, but we might have family problems that are going through a big ceremony. We might have friend problems, or just like studying problems. So every kid can relate in some way to the stories in this anthology.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably one of my favorite aspects. And it leads me to my first question. So one reason I'm so glad to be talking about coming of age on my podcast is that we can share information about the Jewish culture to the listeners. So having a B'nai Mitzvah is an important coming of age event that many Jewish teens experience. And yet very little information seems to be known about what a bar or bat mitzvah is. And some kids who aren't Jewish don't really understand what a B'nai Mitzvah is. So I'm hoping your book can help change that. So would you explain a little bit about what a bar or bat mitzvah is, and if you had a bar mitzvah?
I did. Well, really, it's just like a coming of age, a rite of passage, a coming of age, like the story here, like the title. It's ritual where a Jewish child, becomes ages 13 or 12, boys or girls, and they're considered now an adult in Jewish eyes. They're ready to take part in Jewish ceremonies and Jewish customs and take their place among, their peers, and they're counted as a voice of Jewish representation. So yes, it really is just, like I said, a rite of passage. I did have my bar mitzvah. I had mine. I was living in Israel at the time, and I had my bar mitzvah actually at the Western Wall. And then
wow,
we had I had a great time there. I enjoyed it. I took in the sense of history. And then we had the party somewhere else. I was living in an absorption center, and we had the party that night at a bomb shelter.
Well, that sounds like a very eventful experience, and also one that's very meaningful, because the Western Wall is so important in is like Hebrew history, like Israeli history, because that's one of the walls of the Jewish temple, like our temple thousands of years ago. So it's a very meaningful piece of history. So that must have been such a great and grand experience.
I was. I really, really enjoyed it then. I recently went back to Israel a couple of years ago, and we visited the wall, and it was probably even more meaningful now, just because at the time I was so involved with my bar mitzvah that I didn't get to appreciate it as much. But now going back and looking and seeing other kids getting ready for their bar mitzvahs there, it made me appreciate it that much more.
Yeah. And that was such an interesting answer. And my next question is kind of leaning towards The Pocket Watch, your short story in the Coming of Age anthology. So in your short story, The Pocket Watch, the protagonist Daniel's grandpa gives him a watch that he claims is a time machine, and his claims turn out to be true. Daniel travels hundreds of years into the past, and on each occasion, he ends up in places with signs saying no Jews allowed, or even worse. Daniel comes to learn to be grateful for all he has in the present, because at one time, he wouldn't even have been allowed to have a bar mitzvah. This is such a meaningful tale, and I'm so grateful you wrote it. Was there anything in particular that inspired you to write your short story?
First and foremost, I just wanted to entertain. I really wanted to talk about that. I love time travel. I love science fiction. So I didn't think there would be any science fiction stories other than mine. And there wound up being a few in there. But I wanted to entertain, but I also wanted to relay the message that the important thing was, the ritual, the ceremony, not necessarily the party. Didn't matter how much you spent on your parties, didn't matter, what celebrities you're going to have there, or if you're going to hire dancers, hire a singer, hire a rapper, whatever it is. It's the main thing it's the passing down of the custom, passing down of the ritual. And that's what I wanted Daniel to know, because at the beginning of the story, he's obsessed that other friends are having more at their bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs than he's having. So I wanted that to be the main message, that all that stuff doesn't matter. This is what matters.
Yeah, and your short story is one of my favorites because it's a real reminder that a bar mitzvah or b'nai mitzvah, it isn't supposed to be a party. Like, many people think of a b'nai mitzvah as like a party, but it's a lot more than that. So I think that Daniel's story is a really great reminder that a bar mitzvah, it's so important, and it's more than just a party. It's a rite of passage, and so many Jews have done it over the years, and it's really important. You have to remember that.
Absolutely. That's exactly the point. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, that and take in the ritual, take in the custom,
Mhm.
and be proud of what you're doing, what you're accomplishing. Be proud that you're going to now be considered part of the Jewish community.
Yeah. And I can't wait for my bar mitzvah. So I find it shocking that some people believe that Jewish themed books aren't considered diverse.
Mhm.
Have you heard this? And if so, do you happen to know why Jewish books aren't considered diverse and how can we combat that?
Well, yes, I've heard people trying to keep Jewish books out of the discussion of diverse books. I've heard entire groups doing that. Why that is? Plain and simple. It's anti-Semitism, plain and simple. It's, hey, we want to accept everyone. Every voice is, wants to be accepted and represented, but not you guys, not the Jews.
Yeah.
So that's plain and simple what it is, no matter how much someone else will deny to the otherwise, to the contrary. So that's one of the things that, you combat it, you keep calling them out on it, keep telling them that, yes, we are diverse voices. Yes, we count, and we are going to be heard.
That is so true. And it's so, to everybody who doesn't really consider Jewish books to be diverse, I've just got to say, we really have to combat that. And we're going to stand up for what we believe in, and because we need to be heard. And I think that's a great message that you and the other authors of the coming of age anthology really relay, like, time and time again. Like, the characters, they stand up for themselves. They're proud of who they are. And just having that pride is one of the best ways to combat anti-Semitism. So I think that the characters in coming of age, they're not just entertaining. Of course, they really are. But they're also, like, kind of an example to Jewish readers, or just readers of all cultures and religions, that we need to be heard, and we're proud of who we are. We need to remember that.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Now, you should be proud of anything you are. And I want other Jewish kids to be proud of who they are, not to say, I have to hide it, or I'm ashamed, or I'm scared. Be proud of who you are.
Yeah. And also, another question that I'd like to add is, what was the process of editing 13 different stories into one anthology?
It was sometimes a pain, but mostly fun. It's, there were no criteria. There's no criteria given to the authors that you have to do this or have to do that, other than it has to be a story about a bar or bat mitzvah. That was the only thing that they had to do. So everyone, like you mentioned before, and like I mentioned, there are a lot of different types of stories in here, and that was the fun part. There were, you had like memoir type stories, you had just like fiction stories, you had science fiction stories. So you had a lot of different themes and genres within the stories, and it was really just fun to editing and seeing all the different types of stories and passing them along. And at the end, that we had 13 authors really kind of fit for a story about a bar mitzvah, anthology, bat mitzvah anthology.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you didn't really put strict restrictions on the authors, because it's just so great that there are, like, there's wide varieties of stories and genres inside of the coming age anthology. And it's even more great that there's a planet Latka involved. So the science fiction stories are some of my favorites, because it's a rite of passage when you're whether you're on Earth or planet Latka, and it's just fun to really see all the differences in all the different stories.
I'm confident that anyone who buys this book will find at least one genre that they will like in it, because there's such a wide variety.
Yeah, some genres that you might find, listeners, are realistic fiction, fantasy. There's also a lot of time travel involved, which I really liked. Whether it's Noah's Ark coming to the present, or the characters going to the past.
Mm-hmm. And that surprised me.
Yeah, it surprised me as well. And as someone who aspires to be an author someday, can you share how you ended up pursuing a career in writing? Was there someone who inspired you to become a writer?
The one who inspired me the most is really, I was always writing stories, and I probably really started on your age, writing a lot of stories for myself, for friends, family. But the one who inspired me the most was a teacher in high school, and her name was Mrs. Burney. And she told me that one day, she told me after class that you have a talent for this. And that's really what got me going, is that a teacher. You hear it from your parents, you hear it from
Yeah.
family, like, oh, you're great at this, but you kind of feel like your parents are supposed to say that.
Yeah.
So this was the first person that was outside of a family that told me that. And so that really got to me. That really, helped me, gave me some confidence in this. And but really when I started pursuing it, it was probably around 12 years ago that I really started taking it seriously and wanting to become an author, wanting to be writing. And then I really took it up a notch. And the way you do it is, one, read a lot in the genre that you want. And, people say it all the time, but it's true. And then keep writing, write and write and write. It's not about the writing, really. It's more about the revision later. You have to go back and fix your mistakes. And the first time you write something, the first time I wrote something, I look back at my stories from 10 years ago and I think they're horrible. But so you keep getting better the more you go. And the main thing I always tell any person wanting to do this is don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough to do it. Everyone, if you make a mistake the first time, you just keep practicing and practicing and don't let anyone tell you that you can't.
Those are some great inspiring messages. And I think I've already got the reading part down. I have a whole book.
I see that. That's great.
And I think I need another bookshelf because they're kind of piling up. And I think that's really true. I've heard it a lot from authors. And I mean, they say it all the time, but it's 100% true. What you're saying is really real. Like everybody, if you want to be an author, you're going to have to read a lot.
True.
Because if you read the genre because when you read the genre that you're writing, it can really give you more inspiration and it can kind of widen your writing horizons.
100% true. Yes.
And also, I 100% agree. Like our parents, they say that we're great at writing a lot, but when you hear it from somebody other than your family, I think it can really it can take you somewhere. It can take you on a new journey because it's like reassuring that you're good at writing.
It's extra meaningful to hear it from someone else. Yes,
it is. And now that leads me to my final question. The question I ask all of my authors or everybody that I interview: if you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, from any time period, who would it be and why?
So this can be someone real, right?
It can be
someone who was an author as well. And so my dream would always be to meet Mark Twain. Mark Twain to me is the greatest, American novelist. I would love to, and just so inspirational. I would love to be able to chat with him, pick his brain, talk about writing, talk about, his thoughts on life. And that is my first and foremost person that I would love to, meet.
Maybe you should go into your story and time travel back to Mark Twain's time and you can have a chat.
I'm trying and I will let you know if it succeeds.
And Mark Twain is such an inspiration for so many authors I know. And I think he'd be really interesting to meet. And his stories, like they may have been written a long time ago, and now the styles of writing that are most popular and really that people understand now, they're a lot different from the 1800s. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear about his writing style and what goes through his mind, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a great answer. In fact, all of your answers were very insightful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, I had a great time learning more about the Coming of Age anthology. And it's just been a blast, such a great experience having you on E-Train Talks. I'm so proud to be able to share your book on my podcast.
Yes, and thank you for all the support you've been giving us.
Well, thank you. I think writers, they're my inspiration. So I want to do everything that I can to promote them. And also when I find a story that I love, I'm going to keep promoting it over and over and over again. And that's why I decided to do the Coming of Age panel, to combat anti-Semitism, to entertain, and also to learn more. And also, I just really want to promote your story because it can really shed a light on our culture.
We've all noticed, and we thank you.
Thank you. And I hope the more we talk about coming of age, the greater opportunity there is to get it into the hands of middle schoolers, middle graders, and all readers. And that's all for now, everybody.
And I can't wait till your stories come out.
Thank you. I'm planning on writing some stories. Just got to get more inspiration and read more books. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I have to read more. And that's all for now. As always, stay safe and happy reading. You can find Jonathan Rosen on Twitter and Instagram and also his website. His website's very insightful, and so are his social media accounts.